Hey, 8th grade, what's going on? So we're starting Greek mythology today, and I thought it would be a lot more fun if I actually got to do a little teaching, which I really miss. So pause me, pull up your materials, and let's go over the Greek gods and goddesses, the Olympians. They're wicked cool and fierce. So first off, we should probably talk about what is a myth. All right. Myths are stories that give, for lack of a better term, they're stories of a special kind. They're created to give values to people, to places, to things. They respond to our need for reassurance in how things happen. So, why do the leaves fall from the trees every year? Why is there salt in the ocean? And these stories have been passed down over centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries. There are 3 different kinds, and I'm looking at notes here so I don't miss anything, just like I would be doing in class. So there are 3 typical types of myths. Like I said, they attempt to explain things like a custom or a practice, a natural process like the sun moving across the skies. That's a really cool myth. We'll get there. And like creation myths too. So in order to sort of move forward in the idea of what a myth is, you have to realize that they're mixtures of morals and poetry and histories. But the cool thing is that the ancient people used to use these as a way to teach humans proper behavior, which is kind of, scary, because you would always be threatened with the punishment of a god if you broke one of their rules or standards or expectations. You had to... Let me just check here. This is the first time I'm doing this, so you guys are going to have to bear with me. Mythical gods, the higher powers, had a bunch of shortcomings, but they also had certain standards, rules, and expectations with regards to us mere mortals, people who can't live forever. There were the immortals, them, and the mortals, us. They can't die, we can. Some of the majorly important rules were you had to provide hospitality to strangers. You had to keep your own pride within reasonable bounds. This word for the gods, it was called hubris. If you demonstrated hubris or like excessive boasting or pride, this was like one of the worst offenses to the gods and the goddesses, and they would punish you severely. Let's see. So to sum it up, myths are stories about certain characters, gods, goddesses, men, women, and especially heroes. Lots of heroes in Greek mythology, which we could probably use a little reminder of some heroes, even though we're seeing them in the news every single day. There were stories of adventures, triumphs, tragedies, devotions, and vengeance. It's getting windy out. Let's see. We also had a lot of myths and heroes too, like, George Washington and the cherry tree. An event that never actually happened, but it was used to sort of illustrate a truth about his character, his awesome character. George Washington was super cool. Then we also know, the stories of Paul Bunyan, and those are our country's sort of myths that we have locked onto, and we're going to study the myths that Greece has locked onto. In ancient myths, I already told you the gods are immortal. They can never, ever die, and they sort of tell us mortals when it's our turn. The relationship between the gods and men and women were always dangerous, because you never wanted to tick them off or anything, and you never wanted to cross them or wrong them in any way. They were very formidable. Look that word up. It's a good one. All right, so let's move on to the great gods, the Olympians and others. So the great gods, they all lived on this awesome mountain called Mount Olympus. It's an actual mountain. It's the highest one in Greece. It's nearly 10,000 feet above sea level. And Olympus, in all of the Greek myths, they made it to seem like 50,000 times bigger than it actually was. So keep that in mind. There were 12 main gods and goddesses, and then there were several lesser ones. When the Greeks began settling in Italy, the Romans liked the Greek gods well enough to create their own myths about them. And even though they changed the names of most of the Greek gods and goddesses, they pretty much kept them the same. We're going to focus mainly on the Greek names, just because that's an easier thing to do while we're remote learning. Although keep in mind the Roman gods and goddesses were considered the equivalent. So here we go. So there's Zeus, this guy. Take a good look at him. Is that up there? Yeah. He's totally awesome. Also known as the Thunderer. The Greeks worshipped Zeus as the ruler of all gods and humans. And as the lord of the sky and the earth, Zeus reigned over all from the home of the gods on Mount Olympus. He can sometimes get really angry at the behavior of the other gods and goddesses. And I'm taking this from your materials that I put into your Google Classroom earlier today. So he's sometimes angry about how humans behave, but he's also known as a really gentle and caring ruler. He punished people by hurling thunderbolts at them from the sky. He was a player. Zeus was a player. He had many, many, many beautiful women on his radar, and it didn't matter if they were goddesses or humans. He liked them all. And sometimes the goddesses weren't real happy about that when they found out that he was playing. Especially his wife, Hera. Not a fan. Not a fan of the game. Then we have Poseidon, his brother. Let me pull him out for you. Poseidon's king, well, god of the oceans. And he's pretty gnarly. He, give me a second. Here we go. The Earth Shaker. Poseidon is Zeus's brother. He's god of the ocean and of earthquakes. He's often distinguished in art by the trident. 1, 2, 3. That he carries. And it's really just a 3-pronged spear. He is the second most powerful god on Mount Olympus. As the mighty lord of the sea, he can cause storms, floods, earthquakes with one stroke of that trident. He was also worshipped as the god of horses. Pretty cool. There's this awesome scene in a video or in a movie that I absolutely love, where these massive horses come flying up out of the ocean, but they're made of waves. They're super destructive. It was pretty cool. He is said to have created the first horse out of the waves, and he said that the actual horse was a gift to humans. So that's Poseidon. Then there was Hera. Hera is Zeus's wife. She is queen of the gods and goddesses, and she was a great lady. She really was... She tried to be fair in lots of things. And she ended up not being fair to some things. Her symbol was the peacock for beauty. She was known for her beauty. She was also known for her massive jealous streak and her fiery temper, especially when dealing with Zeus's lady friends, especially the humans. She really went at him. She often quarreled with her husband Zeus over his love affairs. And the really ironic part of this is that she's the goddess of marriage and married women. So that wasn't a real good look for her when her husband was all out gallivanting while she was, connected to being the goddess of marriage. Athena, she's one of my favorites. She's the daughter of Zeus. They said that she was born from a headache. Like Zeus was walking around. He was like, oh my God, I have such a bad headache. And wham, he got knocked on the head and out she came. So keep in mind, these myths are, you know, they're fun and they're interesting and they're pretty clever and creative. So yeah, she was born out of a headache. I think that's where they kind of came up with, oh, I have a splitting headache. Maybe. She is the goddess of wisdom and war. Obviously, one of the reasons why I really like her. She's super wicked smart. And if you guys remember back to Poe, I should have been way more organized. We talked about how the raven flew in and sat upon the bust of Pallas Athena. So that's exactly who we were talking about, which made perfect sense being in Poe's room because he was wicked smart. So here's Athena. She was also known as the gray-eyed goddess. She's pretty cool. Goddess of wisdom and war, patriotism, and good citizenship. Seems to be a common thread there with Greeks. They really were super interested in good citizenship and patriotism. She is the protector and the namesake for the city of Athens, and I will tell you a story later on about that. When she sprung out of Zeus's head, she was also fully armored with a bronze helmet and a shield. She is the goddess of warfare also. She was the sort of the patroness of justice, which is kind of cool. And yeah, that's about it. I'm sure you recognize what's on her shield. We'll get there too. Next up, we have Apollo. Apollo, oh God. I got things flying all over the place. Bear with me for 1 second, guys. Okay, so Apollo. There's Ares. Here's Apollo. Apollo is the god of light and reason. He was pretty even-tempered. He was celebrated as the god of the sun, so he's obviously to thank for this awesome day today. He was also the god of light, truth, and being reasonable. He was the honored protector of all of the athletes in Greece too, which is kind of cool. He was the patron of many arts, including poetry and music. And here he is playing a musical instrument called the lyre. Get that? See his symbols. He's an animal. He has a twin sister. Whoa. Stuff's flying. He has a twin sister named Artemis. Artemis was gnarly. I love her. She is the goddess of the hunt and the moon, which is kind of cool that we're talking about her today because there's going to be a pretty awesome moon tonight. You should totally check that out. She loved hunting. She loved archery. She was literally the best hunter in Greek mythology. She was worshipped by hunters. The woods and all of the wild animals were completely sacred to her. She is also, obviously, one of my favorite goddesses. She's super cool. Yeah, she's pretty awesome. Then we have Ares, and I know that you all know him. He is the quarrelsome god of war. Ares was the, well, they say hateful god of war. He was such a bloodthirsty bully that even his parents, Hera and Zeus, despised him because he was such a troublemaker. Despite his fierceness, he was actually kind of a coward. He sometimes ran from the battlefield. Bark, bark, bark. He was also unpredictable, and he could often change sides in the middle of battle to make sure that he ended up on the winning team. Lame. So yeah, he is the quarrelsome god of war. And then there was Hephaestus. Hephaestus is kind of the sweetest one of all. I don't know if I have a poster on Hephaestus, which is kind of too bad. Oh, I do actually. That's awesome. So this is Hephaestus. He's the friendly god of fire. Everybody loved him. He was kind and he was super talented, but he was so ugly at birth. His mother threw him off of Mount Olympus. Hucked him right off. He was lame after that. Not meaning like, oh, you're so lame. Meaning lame that he walked with a limp. He wasn't as strong as the other gods. He, in fact, is the only god who wasn't considered beautiful. His beauty was on the inside. But he was the most favorite, and I'll tell you what, he landed the prettiest goddess, which is kind of awesome. Can you guess who? Who the prettiest was? I'll get there in a minute. His peace-loving nature made him friend of God and gods and humans. He was a master craftsman and a super awesome blacksmith. He actually was the one who forged the armor for all of the gods and goddesses. He became the patron of handicrafts, pottery, sculpture. Everybody loved him. And his wife, Aphrodite. They said that she was born from sea foam. She was said to have been the goddess of love and beauty, and she did, in fact, marry the ugliest god, Hephaestus. It was kind of a punishment, but it didn't really pan out that way. She was known as the friend to all those in love, and because of her beauty, she had massive power over humans and gods. Some believed that she was born from the sea, and yeah, that's her. Aphrodite. Her son is Eros. He's not really a major deity that we're gonna study, but it's kind of interesting that Aphrodite's son was Eros, aka Cupid. Okay, next we have Hermes. I know I have one for Hermes. He's the messenger of the god. He is super wicked fast. You can see the wings on his shoes. He's also the god of science and invention, so that's kind of really cool. And if you see here, there's a symbol there that you would recognize for like pharmacies. He was the winged messenger of the gods. He was graceful. He was super wicked fast. And he was also the protector of travelers, which is kind of neat. One job that he had was leading travelers who had died to the underworld. And he was also the trickiest or shrewdest of all the gods. He was worshipped by merchants and thieves as the protector of tradesmen. So that's kind of neat. We're going to learn a lot more about him. And then we have Hestia. She's kind of one of the lesser known goddesses. But she had a really cool job. She was goddess of the hearth and home. This is Zeus's sister. She was the goddess who played a relatively small part in the myths, but she was really, really hugely significant to the Greek people because she was the person who blessed homes. So if you ever hear of like sitting over the hearth, which would be the fire that a lot of Greeks kept burning in their homes, you would always have food there or just a place to gather around the hearth to stay warm because they didn't have like thermostats or heat back then. She always made like homes feel comfortable. In each city, this is cool, in each city there was a public hearth that was sacred to Hestia, and the fire never went out. ever. It was never allowed to go out. There were actually people that like stuck around there to make sure that the fires kept going to pay tribute to her, which is kind of awesome. These public hearths were cared for by 6 priestesses, and they were called Vestals. So that's Hestia. And then lastly, we have probably the most important goddess, if you wanted to eat. This is Demeter. Demeter is Zeus's sister. She is the superly important goddess of agriculture and grain. And she's kind of the bond between heaven and earth. Real quick story. Well, hold on. I won't tell you the quick story yet. She was worshipped in every harvest festival that there was because it was her responsibility to make sure that the crops grew. Her daughter was Persephone. She got tricked by Hades into eating some food in the underworld. And the rule was if you ate in the underworld, you had to stay there forever. Well, Demeter, as soon as she found out that her daughter was trapped in Hades... Sorry. Dogs. As soon as she found out that she was trapped in Hades, her daughter, she was like, boom, I'm done. I'm not making anything grow anymore. We're going to read about this myth. Powerful. That one was powerful because the gods didn't exist. Hey, that's enough. The gods didn't exist if there weren't any people to worship them. They would just be among themselves, and they certainly weren't going to worship each other, really. So yeah, so these are like the big 12. I know I didn't get to Hades, and you're probably like, where's Hades? Well, let me get to Hades. I really wanted to keep this under 25 minutes, so we'll see how I do. Hades, king of the underworld. He was the dreaded god of the dead and the king of the underworld. He was the brother of Zeus, and they got in a gnarly spat, and that's how he ended up down here. And we'll get there too. He rarely left his kingdom. His domain was also named after him. It was the same name. So Hades ruled Hades. It's kind of egocentric if you ask me, but whatever. We always imagine Hades to be this shadowy underworld beneath the earth where souls go to be judged, but it's deeper than that, literally. So, there's lots of other gods and goddesses that we'll sort of hear about in some of the myths that we're going to learn, and I think I'm going to read them to you every day because it's more fun for me this way, and I hope it's more fun for you too. So I'm going to cut it off here to just sort of give you the information about the gods and goddesses. Go and do my assignment. I'm curious which god or goddess you kind of relate with. Tomorrow I'm going to tell you about the 9 muses and the fates. They are the 3 that are responsible for your happiness or your sadness. But if you want to get a little information about them prior to tomorrow, read the material, that I put in your materials section of Google Classroom. I hope you guys are doing well. I miss you like crazy. This is already fun. And get out tonight and look at the moon. It's supposed to be insane. Big supermoon. Blah. That's all I got for you today. Have a good one. Get some sun. Bye.